Okay, so good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm Alex. I'm a software engineer at Intuit, and today is our second Argo contributors meeting. So I think we have new attendees in the meeting. I guess before we start, our agenda. If you are new to that meeting, if you didn't introduce yourself last time, can you please go ahead and tell us your name and why you want to, be in that meeting?
So, hello everyone, Jan here. Yeah, I'm an individual contributor since I don't know, a year and a couple of months or so. Some people might know me from Slack or from the issue tracker already. So my handle is Jan Fis. Yeah, and I'm happy to be part of this great community.
Awesome. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you spoke with Jan. I saw that in our dev channel. Yeah.
Yeah, welcome, Jan. Nice to see you around.
Yeah, we don't talk too much,
Likewise.
Hello, Jan.
So I feel like we, communicate in Slack almost like every day, and almost never we talk in person, or at least using Zoom. Okay, maybe that's it. No one else, no new other faces.
I'll introduce myself. I missed.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Shobhik. I work for Red Hat. I am an architect at Red Hat around a few areas, and that includes Argo CD and GitOps. I'm here because my team and I want to contribute into Argo CD, and we want to ensure that we are ramped up, and we want to ensure that I can share some of the load from you, Alex, and the other core contributors around how we plan and take up key areas of Argo CD itself. Yep, that's it. Back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a couple agenda items today. So we're going to talk about using telepresence to develop Argo CD, and Oleg was going to do that presentation, and I think he's a couple of minutes late, so we'll push it to the second half of the meeting. And for that meeting, I prepared kind of post-mortem for 1.7 release. So just some small analysis of all the regressions which leaked into release, and we did catch them. And then, just kind of not real proposals, but some ideas of how we can improve it and how we can improve quality of next release. And I just got a message from Oleg that he can do a presentation now, first as planned. So Oleg, please go ahead if you're ready.
Hey guys, so I just will start to share my screen. So you can see my screen. Okay. So a couple of, I think last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, I had made a PR that described how to use a tool called telepresence to debug your cluster, your Argo CD application that is installed on your remote cluster. And you can just go to and read it actually, but I'll just show it to you. Also, I have here the configuration for VS Code, because this is what I'm using. If you're using IntelliJ, I know they have it. I'm just not fully sure how to configure it. So telepresence is an open source tool from DataWire that gives you the ability to swap a remote deployment with the same identical deployment in terms of the spec, with the change of the image. So once the image is changed, it will open an SSH connection back to your local machine and start forwarding all the traffic. So you can start debugging the remote service on your local cluster, your local process. It gives you a very quick feedback loop. You don't need to build image, push it to production, and stuff like that. It gives you the very realistic environment. All the configuration stays exactly the same. And because nothing is actually, except of the service, is running on your local machine, it has a minimal footprint. So we can just see the diagram, how it actually works. Once you spawn the telepresence CLI, it starts doing two things at once. So it's starting to swap the deployment on your remote cluster. And it's starting to spawn a sub-process on your local machine. Once the deployment is swapped, it will inject all the original environment variables into the new process. All the network and the volume will be forwarded and transmitted through SSH tunnel. And your new process is starting. By the way, all the volumes is accessible under the telepresence route. So if there is no questions on the diagram, I will go to the demo. So here I have the Argo CD server. And here is my cluster. Everything is installed. And I will be swapping this pod. So it's just as simple as telepresence, swap deployment. What is the name of the deployment? What is the service name? What is the environment variable file name? I will explain how it's related to the debugging later. What are the ports to expose? I'm sorry, it's irrelevant. What are the ports to be exposed from the cluster to your local machine? And what is the sub command to run on the command to run on the sub process once it started? So let's just hit the start. And we will see immediately that this pod is being replaced with the new one. Let's watch it. Oh, yeah, it requires a root access because it's mounting your local file system. So we immediately see here is the new pod is being already running, and the old one is terminated. If we have a service that's running multiple replica, it will just scale it down to 0. That's it. So once everything is ready on this side, we can see that we are running. I'm so sorry. We are running a sub-process. And if we go environment, we'll see all the environment variables that were injected originally to Kubernetes. So from now on, we can just go and, oh, by the way, if we go and to telepresence root, we're actually looking inside the container file system. So we can see, for example, the OS release. So the volume is being mounted to our file system. So once the environment is actually ready, we can just go and compile the local server. Yeah, it can take some time.
Okay, and while it's building, can you just step back? So it basically, what image does it use for the new pod?
In pod, it's using an image from telepresence to establish the connection. It's just changing. We can see that. It's just, here's the, as you can see, everything is exactly the same beside the image.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And then does it happen to have make, or does it magically install all the tools into that image? All the
It does
tools?
not need. It doesn't need anything inside the image beside starting the the network to your local.
Oh, okay, I see. So basically, the build was running on your local machine, and it's
so the build is running
okay.
here. It just started on, and because I have all the environment variables on the process, I can just go and start the server, and this will work. But to start to actually debugging the process, I need to use the launch file, which I put on the documentation, just because of I need somehow to inject the same environment variables to the process that VS Code starting. So this is why I created this environment file. It's exactly the same variable file as we have here. Same thing that all the stuff that the pod has. And I can just hit the debug, and it will take like maybe a few seconds the first time to start debugging, and we are good to go. Let's see that. And yeah, it will start immediately. Yep. So we can see that everything started with minimum configuration. If I just go to Argo CD account list, I'm going to the same endpoint, and from the cluster back to my local machine. So I see the request. And if I want to debug it, it's just as easy as this one. Here is the debug. So the same way I can debug one or multiple services. The only conflict may be if you have different ports, so you need to change your local port to something else and then tune the application to use it. It's nothing too complex. Yeah,
and I feel like I'm still kind of missing one last point. How does it know which binary to start? Can you maybe show one more time launch configuration?
Yeah, so here's my local configuration. It's just building the command Argo CD server. It's starting it as is, like the same thing that I would do, go run, something like that.
I see. Okay, and then last thing, so there is volume mounting between the pod and your local file system. So every time you make a change locally, it kind of magically moved into the.
So yes, so as luckily Argo CD is not depending on the file system. It's not looking for files from file system as much as I saw at least. But for future maybe pull requests, to use it, we need to take into account that the root may be different, because when debugging a remote cluster, the root is this one. I think Sorry, my AirPods down.
It happens. Okay, and maybe last question. I think it may be obvious, but still, like, what advantages do you see in developing this way versus just running things locally?
So as I mentioned in here, once I started to play with Argo locally, I was needed to read everything on the contribution guide and running Argo CD locally. And I wanted to start very fast. I wasn't sure if my environment is configured properly or not, but I did know that the Kubernetes cluster is running and everything is good. So this was my first motivation. I was not sure about how to do it. And the other benefit that you have is that all the other environment beside your service stays the same thing as your production or staging. It's not on your local machine. It has a minimal footprint. It doesn't require you to run multiple services. So I'm just running this one, that's all. And my feedback is very fast. You saw it. I'm just going Argo CD
accountable. It's the same thing, the same way I can go to the UI and I will just start debugging it. This is at least my motivation.
That makes sense to me. I had more comments, but I want to let people ask their comments too. So ask their questions. So if anyone else wants to ask something, it's a good time.
No, so I think I like this because some of my development process includes actually running things on a remote cluster that's not a local one. And I almost never run anything locally these days. So yeah, this definitely helps me there, I would say. So thank you for this, Oleg.
I'm also on the same, actually the same point as you. I'm not running almost nothing on my local machine. Everything is, this is a cluster on Amazon, but the point is that it requires root access both on your local machine and the pod to be running as root, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
This is a limitation.
Which is, I mean, I understand why that limitation exists. And if that is not a problem, I do think that there's a I mean, telepresence is something I've used in the past. It can significantly boost developer productivity. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I can say that in our this in our company, so the pods of course are not running as root, but when I'm debugging, I don't know, staging or any other environment, the configuration just starts the pods with the root user, so that's okay. It's anyway it puts you almost as production environment.
yeah. So I think running as root isn't as bad as running as privileged. So as long as it's not privileged, that's fine. It's just root, it's okay-ish, I would say. Okay, back to you, Alex.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a question. So with the remote, the process is actually running remotely, right? But you're forwarding the debug ports of the process to the local debug client, right?
Yes.
So let me ask you, you're debugging Go. So the Delve executable, which is the debugger, is it actually in the container itself as well? Or is it?
No. All the tools that I'm using are on my local machine. I'm using everything, all my, let's say, favorite tools. I can easily stop using the integrated debugger of VS Code and just run Delve debugger to connect to running process.
Interesting. So does Delve actually launch the process remotely, effectively? Is that
the process running locally, but all the traffic comes and goes to the remote cluster.
Interesting. Cool. Very, very interesting.
We can see that this is the sub-process that starts by telepresence, and all the networks are just going back to the cluster. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
I noticed, so basically you shared your VS Code configuration file in documentation, and I kind of keep debating, does it make sense to have to commit it so people can just use it instead of copy pasting it from documentation? I know a lot of developers are opposed to have kind of IDE specific.
I know that it will work probably for the VS Code, but for people that are using for, let's say, IntelliJ, I'm not sure, because they need to download some kind of plugin that will allow using the nvarc, which my nvarc, the default nvarc, just sourcing this one. So this is the configuration in IntelliJ, and I can commit the launch JSON, but for IntelliJ, I'm not sure what should be committed.
I see. So the kind of challenge is it's hard to have something which just works out of the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, but documentation is kind of better than nothing, because we pretty much have we kind of assume that people know how to configure their IntelliJ IDE, their IDE, and don't even have documentation. So I feel like I have some hidden knowledge which I hesitated to put into files, but I can put them into documentation and describe how I configure my ID.
Yeah. So
Quick question.
Yeah.
I was trying to find. Okay, this is in the developer guide. Developer guide.
It's under the debugging remote.
Okay, I'll find it. Thank you.
I'll just send it in the.
Yeah. Okay.
I have one quick question. I'm not sure I fully understood the swap deployment step that I saw in the diagram. Just wondering what exactly is happening there and why we need to do that.
You didn't understand why you need to do that?
Yeah, just like what exactly is the swap deployment?
The swap starts exactly the same spec of the pod beside a different image. The image that comes from telepresence is that command to start forwarding all the traffic back to your local machine. Let's actually see that.
Okay, got it.
Oh, it's more like a treasure horse. You plant it into the deployment, then it's actually back pointing to your local binary, I believe.
It doesn't have to be directed to your binary. It just starting to forward all the traffic to your local machine, and you can start wherever you want.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome presentation.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so I think it's my turn now. Let me share my screen. So the next topic I wanted to talk about was, it was kind of Honk set me up to do that. He proposed to give us a short description of what was happening with 1.7 release. And I tried to, basically, I just have a list of most notable issues which happened and some maybe suggestion. And then we can kind of brainstorm together. And if we like some of these suggestions, we can convert them into GitHub issues so someone can work on these improvements. Okay, so I will post document in the Slack, and it's already available in calendar invitation for this meeting. So okay, first couple issues. So it goes kind of, so first issues are maybe boring, and then it's getting more and more fun. So let me start from the simplest one. So in 1.7 we accidentally broke 1.15 Kubernetes support. So basically, not everything was broken. It's just one functionality, but pretty important one. As a quick summary, users were unable to create any new tokens for app projects. And not sure if you're familiar with it, but basically this is the most famous way to integrate your CI and Argo CD together. And these tokens kind of open limited access to Argo CD. And the reason is kind of very simple here. We don't even have right now an official list of supported Kubernetes versions. And I feel like this is easy to fix. We just need to agree on which versions we want to support. And then second problem, I think it's a little more difficult to execute. We don't have automated tests for different Kubernetes versions. So we have tests for token generation, but it just uses Kubernetes 1.16. And I believe GitHub supports matrix testing. I think this is how it's called. So the same set of tests can be run on different, using different Kubernetes versions. So yeah, and that's the proposal. And I'm going to maybe convert it into GitHub ticket because it is kind of, it's hard to argue about it. The only open question is, I think we should take it offline, which versions of Kubernetes we want to support. And
yeah,
I guess.
I think a quick note there will be that even if we can't get to that answer, because that might be a difficult question, because there may be many enterprises running on old Kubernetes,
Mhm.
The thing that we should probably agree on is that what is the range of Kubernetes versions we should run our tests on to begin with, so that we at least
Okay.
know something is failing or not.
Mhm.
Because sometimes we may say that, hey, this is failing. It's a super simple fix to ensure it works there. Or we can say, hey, this works on, like Argo City works on Cube 1.15, except the following things. Like those are things we could get to, but I think the first step would be, let's get a wide range of cube versions tested on a regular basis. That'll help us answer the next question: that what can we reasonably support?
Actually, I think this is pretty much possible with GitHub Actions. They have something like matrix testing, and I think we should just clone the E2E test step and use different Kubernetes versions as from K3s or something like that.
Yeah, hopefully it's not,
It's probably not
easy.
not that complicated.
Okay, awesome. This one was a quick one. So the next one is maybe a little bit more difficult. So in 1.7 we made a dangerous change. So we refactored the logic responsible for Kubernetes resource reconciliation. And so the previous logic was kind of, we call it poor man's diffing. So we were trying to, it was not, the problem with previous implementation was that it was not matching Kubernetes behavior 100%. So we made a switch, and as a result of it, we kind of dropped a bunch of code which was handling edge cases, and we also dropped edge case related to creation timestamp field, and that was basically a mistake. Apparently, creation timestamp was there not because it was just an edge case. It was edge case, but it was related to just the situation. Kind of a lot of users intentionally put creation timestamp field into the spec in Git, and the value of creation timestamp is set to null, and it immediately changed as soon as you kubectl applied that manifest. So, and then so the logic was kind of correct. It was reporting you a difference, but the user intention is, to kind of not see the difference.
Got it.
Yeah, so we dropped that support of special handling for creation timestamp, and then a lot of users complained about it. And then I kind of tried to investigate what was happening, and I found that a lot of popular Helm charts have, this error, and that's why the proposal is to somehow have automation and just run a basic test, which simply install a set of Helm charts and make sure that after the installation, application based on that Helm chart is in sync. So yeah, this is basically what I'm saying is that if we simply ensure that Argo is able to install popular Helm charts like Cert Manager or Istio, maybe it's too much, Radius, we would definitely catch that error. And yeah, and I'm happy to hear if anyone have any other suggestions.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So I think we need to do a couple of things. One is we need to ensure that when very often what happens is that the PR which makes the code change to, let's say, drop the special handling of creation timestamp also fixes the test that basically would have failed otherwise. That's it's a green CI and everything goes fine. So I think this looks like we need some kind of acceptance test suite. Now we have to figure out what that would imply in the context of our project, so that we know that when somebody's changing that, they're effectively changing behavior that is that can have an impact on the user's expectation. So yes, we need to have some kind of acceptance testing framework in it, which is not Go unit tests. And as part of that, yes, I completely agree with you. We should have some real world Helm charts, which are complex enough and popular enough that we add into our test bed. there's no harm
Yeah.
doing that. It's really good.
And good you mentioned unit test. We did have a unit test for, for this particular field, and I happily get rid of it because I thought, oh, it's not needed anymore. That's so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, so in this, it sounds reasonable. Okay, I will create, just a proposal to do that, and we can, in this issue, we can figure out a list of Helm charts, and yeah, and then work on it. Okay, the next issue is kind of related. So it is again, we made a change, and we start using pretty much the exact same logic for diffing as Kubernetes, and unfortunately, Kubernetes 18.4. It had a bug, and so kubectl diff could just hang and don't execute diff at all if it tries to compare a very big JSON document, and such document could be a CRD manifest from one of cert manager CRDs. Yeah, and so good thing that was cached even before release was created, and so we kind of, so we fixed it, but the bad thing that it was not really tested well. So basically we had two PRs. One PR was merged before release was created, and second PR was merged after release was created. Yeah, so kind of, I think the explanation why bug was created in the first place is because it is performance related. It's not easy to kind of catch it in just unit testing. So unless you know that this bug might exist, you can't write test for it. The bad thing is that the initial fix was not tested properly, and it kind of leaked into the release. And I see kind of two improvements here. First is to test better, and I guess basically the more, with more contributors, we potentially have more people who are going to test release, and then just second pair of eyes. And I guess this previous proposal would help as well. If we simply have a test which keep kind of verifying popular Helm charts, and we would catch that error during development if we continuously try to deploy most recent version of Cert Manager, we would know about the problem like way sooner, even before the release was ready.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of.
So I think quick question there. So I mean, which means at this point we do know which are those critical popular charts that people typically use, and that itself has crowdsourced the information for us. So that becomes part of a test bed. That's awesome. I think this goes back to, I think, a couple of things. One is, yes, we need to figure out a better testing strategy in general for acceptance tests. What I said previously, that's fine. But I think in this case, you're saying that this needed some kind of performance testing that is not trivial, that we wouldn't catch easily. So
actually, I should take it back. I mean, I was trying to say that unless you know that this particular function might hang, like it might be performance, it might have performance issues. Unless you know it, you cannot even create test for it. So that's why no one thought about the possibility for creating test. After we know that problem exists, it's extremely easy. You just need a simple unit test which tries to compare two files. Yeah. So it was kind of explanation why we had no such tests, because we never thought that such test might be even needed. Existing tests, they were trying to compare kind of very small files with different edge cases, and we never tried to just feed a giant file and then see how it works.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. I think a couple of things then. I think, yeah, we need to have basically those popular charts that typically encountered that, and then use that learning to create a maybe test chart ourselves, which uses a model of all the complexities together that we know we can maintain. Like That will
and
gradually help us grow a test candidate for the chart that would get eventually used.
mhm. And I feel like,
Question.
go ahead, Jason.
Do you think it's appropriate to actually have like a more comprehensive test suite that is not run actually as part of every pull request or commit, but run regularly, like on a cron schedule that is...
I was thinking the same. I feel like even if we have the test potentially can be time consuming, because if you want to install a Cert Manager, it takes, I guess, minutes, because it runs, sync hooks, basically some jobs which tries to do something with Kubernetes. But at least if we run it every day, or even every week, would be already helpful.
Right, because I don't know that you can install, say, like Istio on K3s or
and you're right that if you, for example, you cannot run such tests in parallel because it's just going to be expensive. Like if you install many Istios, it will use a lot of resources.
Yeah, that's just that's one strategy that we're gonna take with rollouts, because we need more integration type testing with like ALB Ingress and Istio, and it's basically not really possible or practical to run those as part of the pipeline, ICI pipeline.
So there are some things we do, Jess, for example, in some of the other Red Hat run open source projects. We have per PR tests, where on every PR we stand up a cluster, OpenShift cluster on AWS, and then we effectively run the whole test suite. It takes half an hour per PR to actually just go through that. It is expensive, but then one thing which I could figure out what is the best way, because it's an upstream project, of course, is to we do have some infrastructure set up to actually have tests run against OpenShift across multiple versions. In short, yes, I know that this is expensive and this needs to be run on a less frequent basis, but then we need to be still aware that we can still end up in an awkward position where 5-6 PRs went in and the nightly job fails, and we're trying to figure out which change broke that. So, as a first step, I would say let's have a well-written out test suite for this. Let's try to run it as frequently as possible. And if it goes out of hand, we reduce it. Because in the end, if you have to detect that, let's stop this PR from making a mess, it has to be at the PR level, no matter how expensive it is. So, I do agree it's expensive, Jess. But like I said, as a first step, let's see if we can do it on every PR. No matter, if it takes 2 hours to run, of course, I'm not going to support that. But if it takes half an hour to run, I think that's reasonably okay, given the amount of pain it'll save us later on.
Right. Yeah, there's a technical challenge and also the resource challenge.
Yeah.
I guess the technical challenge that I was like, I don't know that in the at least the infrastructure that we have right now that it would be technically possible to actually test Cert Manager against or Istio or those things against a small K3s. If given the infrastructure, I would definitely agree, and half an hour is nothing compared to the developer time chasing this after the fact. So I agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, and I feel like, so these 3 tickets are kind of related, and I feel like a short summary is that we just don't have enough functional tests. Yeah. All right, and next issues are all related to performance, and they all kind of maybe have the same suggestion, and it has small kind of pre-story to it. So there were no bug, but at some point at Intuit, we reached some scalability limits where one Argo CD just could not work, and it was not even related to controller. It was related just to supposedly the part which is supposed to be very simple, the UI and API. And what we learned is that apparently Kubernetes doesn't really like when you write into its CD very frequently and when you have too many open connections.
DB
And-
after all, very basic one.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, the improvements we made were extremely simple. We just tried to move some fields which were changing very frequently into Redis because Redis can handle it better. And that was one improvement. And second, API server in 1.7 no longer read data directly from Kubernetes. It tries to read it from Informer as much as possible. I think only maybe two APIs tries to intentionally read data from Kubernetes to ensure it gets the fresh, not obsolete data. Everything else is from Informer. And yeah, and then we tested things internally as we usually do. Maybe, I'm not sure if I think we had some presentation about it, but basically what we do at Intuit, the team at Intuit, we have dog food cluster, which we use to deploy so-called add-ons. So that cluster is great for performance testing, but it mostly tests kind of controller performance. And number of users of that cluster is not so big. It's pretty much team that develop Argo CD, Argo workflows and rollouts, and we use it to deploy Argo workflows, rollouts, and events into multiple clusters. So, and after 1.7 release, the first complaint we've got was from users, and basically we ourselves noticed it. So sometimes UI just would not load, and we were trying to figure out what was it, and there was no metrics on backend, and the reason is that the problem was only on client side. After we switched to Redis and started using informers for so-called long pooling APIs, so what happened is every time user open application detail page in Argo CD UI, the UI would open 2 persistent connections to Argo CD, and browser has limitation. Basically, every browser don't let you open more than 6 open connections to single domain. And yeah, so what happened is we increased, we used to have such connection, but user had to open 1 connection per page. We increased it to 2 connections, plus after switching to Informer, the pooling API, it became very stable and it never closes because Informers, don't close. You can just infinitely read data from Informer.
Right.
As a result, user opened 2 persistent connections which never closes, and after trying to, after opening 3 tabs, 4th tab just wouldn't open at all. Yeah, and apparently it's a well-known problem if you use long pooling or like servers and events protocol. And one of the suggestions is to close connection when user kind of click away and move to a different page. Browser supports visibility API, and it's kind of relatively easy to just open and close these connections when you navigate on the page and off. And that's what we did. So we made this improvement, released it, tested everything, and everything was working fine. And then we moved to the next problem. Like 2 days later, we start getting complaints that sync pipelines hangs sometimes. And after basically 5 days of investigations, we realized that we had a bug, again, created in 1.7. While reading data from Informer, there was a possibility of deadlock. And the bug was in production for quite a while, but it was extremely difficult to reproduce it. After we improved UI, we created perfect conditions to reproduce that bug. So the bug could happen, the deadlock could happen if user open and close connection like very quickly and frequently, which was happening when users switch between different pages. And yeah, so it took 5 days to find the bug. Finally, we fixed it. And one more kind of related issue is that while fixing the bug, we created a security issue, which is, the summary is here. So, and kind of the summary of all 3 issues is that it seems like seems to me we have almost no infrastructure to test scalability and performance. We have pretty good set of E2E tests, and they catch functional errors. And the dog food cluster which we use at Intuit, it really let us test well controller performance. But to test API and UI performance, you need something which creates traffic, and we don't have such thing. And one proposal could be to kind of try to develop an automation, and that automation could be as simple as run a smoke test, kind of deploy a simple application using Selenium scripting, basically using UI, create an application, click sync button, and then make sure that elements are rendered correctly, as well as we can have a Jenkins pipeline which keeps syncing that application. So if we had this automation in place, we would catch the error quickly.
Yeah, I think there's this automated UI and API test that's basically in the UI world. I think it's called E2E tests kind of thing. But I think you're saying that apart from that, we also need something that would generate significant amount of traffic.
Yeah, it's kind of Argo CD. I call it significant, but I don't want to scare you. Like even if you have like 5 concurrent users, kind of fake users, that would be more than enough, because right now at Intuit we have a way to track how many users we have. It's up to like 10 people at the same time.
Okay.
I mean, developers don't use Argo CD on the it's not Facebook.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, concurrent users is always a different ball game, so that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's another kind of. Basically, I feel like it's important because we need to touch performance in 1.8 again, and then we will do our best to test it, but it will be hard, and 1.8 can have yet another unexpected, basically like looking at this after we already know the reasons, I cannot say what could be done better to prevent it. Like it's hard to, it took us like an hour. I think we were sitting with Jesse and trying to, staring at code and trying to figure out how this, how it can break. And basically we just saw like 5 lines of code in front of us and there was a bug. And yeah, so.
Basically it led to that because you've solved a good problem of using informers. And once you did that, that basically ensured that the UI was super happy with getting a lot of traffic.
Yeah,
because of that. So
kind of a classic issue is like when a lot of times when you actually increase the performance of something, you end up putting stress and load on the place that has never seen that before, which then causes actually this underlying issue that's been there the whole time, but just never exposed because of those performance increases. So those are impossible, very, very, very difficult to always predict those things. So I agree. It's you just kind of have to dog food and but I don't know what else we could have done.
Yeah, the only kind of constructive proposal is to maybe try to develop this smoke test automation, and then we can, we cannot open access to everyone to our cluster, but we can run that automation in our cluster and then, report results, like post it maybe to GitHub, like even.
I think end-to-end UI testing, and that's effectively like a Selenium way of doing that with a little more traffic. That is not something that you necessarily have to do on every PR. That is something that, that is something that could, as Jess, you were saying, that it could be effectively a cron job that runs at a specific, interval. We just have to ensure it runs frequently enough so that we know it well ahead of doing a release, what is broken, or we just basically don't make a PR today and know about it 2 months later. But then that is a perfect candidate for something that doesn't have to be on every PR, but can be an expensive thing that is well controlled. There's no chance of abuse of that. So we should definitely aim for that.
Yeah. Okay. And I think it's a good kind of segue into the next topic. It was about, the work we're doing for next release. And after fixing 1.7 release bugs, we learned that in 1.7 we made a lot of changes which we were planning to do, which are performance improvements, and a lot of contributions from community. And we never planned to have this, to work on these things. But we obviously, we accept contributions because all the features which were contributed are useful, which is great. At the same time, I think it affected the quality of release because we had to test way more than we were planning to test. And so I think the kind of caveat was that we had 2 developers who can test, and we had a list of maybe 200 changes, just a spreadsheet. And then 2 of us, we went through each and every, line item in that list. Yeah, so, and the proposal is to kind of try to focus on, scoping what goes into 1.8 release. So, and we just spent time with JC. We try to ensure that 1.8 release has, all kind of issues. It has UI, bug fixes, features, and it's kind of, it used to be, it had only, most critical bug fixes, which are hardest to, you cannot expect a new contributor to work on this type of issues. And now it has more variety of things and kind of, proposal is for new contributors to try to pick from that list first, because it makes sure we know how much time we spend for testing because we kind of committed to deliver these issues. And I think that's that.
Yeah, in short, if you're trying to pick up issues to look at, we'd like to kind of pick from this list first, and it kind of focus on. I think 1.8 is the theme is again on scalability and stability. Primarily, those are our focuses for 1.8. And I think most of these are, or a lot of these are fixing those usability, scalability, all those issues that.
Yes, and it does not have, the release, so in the title you might notice Argo CD notifications, but it's not in that list because notifications is just different repository.
Right.
You're
managing this as a way to take a look. That first line includes all the other repositories also when they go in. So
kind of, yes. It's not extremely formal now. It's just,
it's fine.
And I think it's subject to change. Basically, I think we, going forward, we want to hear from you, from everyone, what should go into the next release. But now, now we just have 2 people committed to test the next release. And what we were trying to do, we were just trying to make sure that, that if we have 5 changes and all changes goes into the same, let's say, project details page, it will be much easier to test because you don't have to switch context. You just open the page and then, during manual testing, you will, if something is wrong, then even if I'm not focused on testing PR number 2 and I'm testing PR 1, I might notice something from PR 2 because it's on the same page.
Do you mind paste the link to the chat?
Yes.
Hey Alex, I just had a small suggestion. So in the PR template, is it possible if we could add an updated documentation tab so that those don't become 2 different PRs? And we make sure that the documentation is up to date?
Can I say it again? You mean, okay, let me try to, I can create
You mean, Gagan, do you mean that ensure that the PR template encourages people to also update the docs while making the change?
Oh, I see it. Now I got it. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think a lot of times we get actually features and then we neglect to document that new feature. That should be actually a checkbox that PRs need to go to have if they're introducing new features.
Okay, I will work on PR. Shall this PR template.
You can assign that to Gagan. You can assign that to Gagan also. He'll make the change for the PR template.
Sorry, that works.
That's good. Again, we had no time for questions, and but we did have a discussion, and I think that's it. That's all I had for two topics.
I think this sounds great, Alex. So I think one thing which I like to do is that I think between all the contributors, I mean, my general ask would be for folks who've been doing this for a while and who know what they're doing, that there are folks who are figuring things out, I would say. If you could go and pick up issues that you want to work on and say that these are the ones that you've laid a dibs on at least, then I want to have some folks here at Red Hat also to go through these list of issues and put a dibs on the ones they would want to work on, just so that I don't just so that somebody here doesn't lay dibs on something which Alex you were planning to work on. So.
Oh yeah, we do assign issues. So we use an assignee thing. I think if you're unable to assign yourself, well, you probably can't assign yourself, but if you
that's fine. I mean, I can just
we'll assign it to you.
Awesome. So I think I just wanted to check. So the ones we have here, I mean, one thing if we could do is that we could go in and effectively, and this is kind of basically an async planning meeting effectively now. So if we could go in and go through the list of issues and we could go and say, hey, this is what I want to work on, and ensure that we follow up on that, then I think that could be the first planning meeting that this contributors group could start with before making things more formal. Any other opinions on that?
I think it's a great first step.
I actually prefer be able to assign an issue myself.
I think you should be able to, and maybe we should try. You don't? You?
I can, yeah.
Okay. I don't know how.
I haven't tried lately, but I can't initially.
Well, I think we should try to fix it. We'll try to just.
There is a role in when you add somebody to GitHub. I think it's called a triger or something, who can assign issues. So based on that. But then
We'll just take it offline. We'll try to. I think we should let everyone in that group to assign issues to themselves.
Cool.
I think that's fine. Awesome. Thank you, Alex, for the postmortem and the introduction to what's going on in 1.8. And thank you, Jan.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm late. I'm gonna check the video.
Okay. Awesome. We just ran out of time. So perfect timing.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.